This is the dubbed and edited version.
Perhaps even the most uninquiring of minds might pause at least for a moment to ponder on the comings and goings of a Land Rover round the perimeter of a disused Suffolk airfield. 2 or even 3 times each week in the autumn, this vehicle will appear unannounced, stop, and its driver perform a strange ritual on the back of the tailboard. A casual passer-by could be excused for imagining he is observing a wild species of English eccentric. And in fact, the whole scientific seriousness of the operation does involve a peculiarly British preoccupation, the study of birds. Debbage Aerodrome is one of the spots chosen by the Severn Wildfowl Trust for the releasing of duck in the search for clues to the mystery of bird navigation. Each winter, thousands of wildfowl journey south from their breeding grounds on the Arctic tundras. For centuries, the ribbon-like estuary of the River Orwell near Ipswich has drawn duck down, and having fed on the foreshore all night, flight upon flight each morning pass over the fields and woodlands that border the river in search for quiet waters where they can preen and sleep in the day. Many will have travelled thousands of miles from the far north, from Finland, Iceland or Arctic Russia, before they come to pause and rest on the shallow mudflats of East Anglia. From a tired duck's eye view, few places can appear more attractive than the ponds on the Orwell Park estate near Nacton, originally constructed round 1800 to store water for a local mill. But it was soon noticed that when the marshes below were disturbed, literally hundreds of pintail, widgeon and mallard would whisper down through the trees. Few 19th century landowners could long ignore the sight of wild duck on their property. Just before Queen Victoria came to the throne, work had already begun on the estate to modify these ponds into a decoy for the commercial trapping of wildfowl. For if successful, profits from dead ducks could then realise a return equal to that of a good farm. A century ago, decoying for East Anglia was a positive industry. There were 26 decoys in Norfolk, 14 in Suffolk, and 30 in Essex alone. The decoyman's cottage at Nacton is tucked quietly away among the trees. Its tall chimneys and high gables seem straight out of Hansel and Gretel. Here was the home of George Skelton, from the great dynasty of Skeltons, who had first come down from Lincolnshire to initiate East Anglians into the mysteries of Dutch techniques. The present occupant of the cottage is Don Revitt, who discovered a new life away from the rat race through marrying the daughter of the last decoyman, Tom Baker. He only recently retired after 50 years' service. The tools of the trade haven't changed much, just a bucket, a sack and a hunk of bread. There can be few privileged to commute so simply to their daily task. Don's role is scientific rather than commercial, and it's largely through his pioneering work that the Wildfowl Trust have learnt to develop the decoy. Though the purpose of the job has changed, most of the techniques practiced are ancient, handed down through the wisdom of experience by generations of decoymen. A decoyman is every bit as dependent on his dog as is a shepherd, and a good animal is hard to find. It is the dog's task to lure the duck subtly, and only one that develops a close contact with its owner will ever prove of any use. Such control takes years of training, and this frisky young dog is still very much at the learning stage. The fortunes of a decoyman rely largely on the weather and the wind, and only rarely are conditions just right. Best of all, Tom Baker used to reckon, was a cold, overcast October with a northerly widgeon wind. Today, the prospects are far from ideal, for bright sunshine makes the duck difficult to work. If the stalker's half shadow is thrown on the water, all will immediately be lost. So the decoyman must guard his approaches. The layout of a decoy is designed to enable ducks to be taken in all quarters of the wind. At each corner of the pool, netted channels or pipes radiate out, and up one of these the decoyman will hope to entice a catch, choosing always the pipe out of which the wind is blowing. Ducks can only be lured towards a pipe if the wind is blowing at them, as they invariably prefer to swim face to wind. Their feathers ruffle if the wind comes from behind. No decoy, said the old Victorian handbooks, can be played until the pipes are perfected. And nothing was more important than the careful sighting of the reed screens, behind which the decoyman hides to work his dog as the ducks approach. Their suspicions must in no way be aroused. Today, wire sheep netting has had to replace tarred hemp mesh on the pipes, but in most other respects, Don Revitt has been careful to maintain the decoy very much in the simple traditional way. The reed screens, for example, are still made from phragmites cut from nearby Martlesham Creek. Yet, however subtle their layout, there's one eventuality for which the screens can offer little protection: visibility from above. Now, any false move will trigger a takeoff. Only silence and waiting can settle the situation. It was expecting perhaps too much of a young, eager dog to work a pipe successfully in such bright, uneasy conditions. But a false attempt shouldn't push the duck off for long. Provided they're left alone and undisturbed for a while, a quiet decoy will soon offer more opportunities for another try. The fortunes of Nacton decoy these last few years have revolved around Bundle, a quiet, unassuming old mongrel bitch. In appearance, she's very much what the old decoyman would have liked of a Piper dog, foxy-coloured with a good brush. But much more important, she's developed that subtle rapport with her owner upon which everything depends. Decoying is a quiet, solitary occupation. Hidden down behind the trees of the estate, the ponds are kept well away from prying eyes. Disturbance ruins everything, and traditionally decoymen avoided fairs and markets and shrouded their affairs in mystery. Approaching a decoy has to be done carefully. Many decoymen believe duck can smell a human, and Don Revitt continues the tradition of lighting a piece of peat to destroy any scent from his breath or clothes before attempting a catch. Today the duck are more settled. Perhaps this time the omens are good. Everything about decoying is built round the strange way duck have for following danger. Their natural instinct, part curiosity, part fear, is to draw to the dog. Hopefully at the start, the decoyman wants his duck settled on the bank round the mouth of the pipe, and must be careful not to move prematurely if the birds are still flying in. Once settled, an attempt can begin. Down behind the screens, the duck on the water are unaware of his movements. Provided the wind is still blowing out from the pipe, there's every chance the birds will move forward, facing the breeze. The peat now is puffed on repeatedly to disguise his presence, as the wind is blowing directly out from him to the birds. And then, finally, he sends his dog out. The presence of the dog at the pipe mouth initially frightens the duck off the bank, but then gradually appears the strange magnetic effect. Bundle, now well used to the task, trots predictably forward into sight, her movements sufficiently slow enough not to cause any unnecessary alarm. Dog and man now work together in their well-rehearsed routine. The animal's movements are closely controlled, and he's baited through his steps with bread, often laced with a little dripping. Tiny jumps are built by the screens to vary the pace of the dog and add to the enticement. The dog, in a sense, is used like a spinner cast by a fisherman, as a lure to draw the prey on. Often a few tame duck will lead the flotilla, and the decoyman will whistle them forward. This is the really crucial time. Any mistake now, and a day's work will be wasted. The decoyman must have a fingertip feeling for pacing. He must know, being literally within a few yards of the birds, at what speed to direct their movement. It isn't simply a mechanical affair, going from screen to screen. Often he will pause and send the dog round and round one spot for minutes on end. Once in the pipe, all depends upon the judgment of when to strike. If you're too greedy and slow, the drawing movement will cease. If you're too quick, most duck will fly out the mouth back to the pond. Only experience can dictate that little extra delay that gives time for still more birds to swim in. The point the decoyman waits for is when the duck reach the elbow-like bend in the pipe. Now he must move quickly to reveal himself from behind the birds at the head show spot. The decoyman follows up rapidly to drive the ducks forward and prevent shrewder birds flying back out to avoid capture. The trap birds go forward into the end tunnel, which is rather like a large angler's keep net. The mesh here is of soft polythene, and despite their flapping, the birds are in no way harmed. In the past, the Nacton pipes have proved devastatingly effective. Back in the winter of 1925-1926, Tom Baker achieved the all-time record with a fabulous total of over 9,000 birds in a single season, including 331 caught on one December day alone. Only the doubtful records of the 18th century claim greater hauls. And for over 50 years, nearly 4,000 birds per annum were taken here, an efficiency rarely equalled in the history of English decoys. Once caught, the ducks are put into sacks. This is the safest way of holding them, as in the dark they will remain silent and quiet. Trapping obviously does them no harm, as some birds who develop a taste for the grain that is spread in the pipes regularly get caught again and again, and are quite untroubled by the experience. Even while the catch is being bagged at one end, the pond settles down as new birds start to come in. To minimize disturbance, the haul is quietly taken away from the pipe. In the commercial days of the past, the decoymen didn't like to delay long, as often hampers had to be packed for speedy dispatch to London via the old Felixstowe Railway. It's only when the ducks reach the decoy house that their experience of being trapped in any way differs from the past. The old storehouse, once the resting place for their lying in state, is now the site of scientific marking and measurement. Round the leg of each duck, a ring is attached, bearing a number and the name British Museum, London, so its movements can be traced if it is ever again recovered. And being sporting birds, many duck do end their days at the end of a gun, so many rings are eventually returned. Information, too, can be gathered from the noting of wing measurements. Quite obviously, none of this analysis must in any way harm the birds. The data gleaned through the laborious listing of centimetre lengths and gram weights would be quite useless if the birds on release had been so shaken by their experience that they behaved abnormally. For the Wildfowl Trust, the great advantage that decoying can offer is not just that great numbers can be taken, but that they depart in the healthiest condition. It's a strange irony that a spot which for ducks must have had associations on the scale of Passchendaele should today see the goal of human activity converted to their well-being. It was from this very place that a pintail departed, to be found in January 1969 in St. Louis, Senegal, the first British duck to be recovered south of the Sahara. Perhaps even old George Skelton would have smiled.